I guess when you work with a guy for 20 years, all day, every day, he says nice things about you. Thank you, Neil. Have a special. Peggy and I are delighted to be here at TAG FinTech South today. And a wee bit more about Peggy. So it is true, early in the morning on September the 5th, 1962, that my mother woke my brother and I up to say that our dad had been killed in a company plane crash. She promptly put us in the 1958 Volvo station wagon, and we drove back to her parents' house on the family farm in Frankfort, Kentucky. And 2 weeks later, I did meet Peggy at church. And Neil is right. When we were 14, I wrote in her yearbook that I was going to marry her. And I accomplished that goal 2 weeks after our senior year in college. She fired me our sophomore year in college. And I don't know what it was like here in Atlanta, Georgia on Easter Sunday, but in Wilmington, North Carolina, it was glorious. And I got a little story for you. So our pastor, Mike, and wife Julie had a similar experience as Peggy and I. So they were high school sweethearts. Mike decided that it was time for them to break up. I don't know if it was the sophomore year in college or when exactly it was, but he wordsmithed every word of a Dear John letter to Julie. And he anticipated her response. Is she going to cry? Is she going to break down? And he handed her this Dear John letter. Julie looked at him. She read every word carefully and said, Michael, you have exactly 24 hours to reconsider. So they know, don't they? They know more than we know. They can look around corners. So that was 1962. I was 11. 20 years later, in 1982, I made a decision. Do you want to be an employee or do you want to be an owner the rest of your life? As I said, Peggy and I grew up in Frankfort, Kentucky. Frankfort happens to be the state capital. There was a community bank in Frankfort, Kentucky that had all the state's deposits. They were coining money in 1982 because interest rates were at an all-time high. And the directors of that bank were the fathers of my friends in high school. And they were buying stock from widows and orphans at 25 cents on the dollar of book value. And I thought if you could just borrow $53 million, you could end up buying all that stock and owning the bank for free. So I went home and I said, Peg, I figured out a way for us to be owners. This is going to be wonderful. John Medlin, some of you will recall, was the chief executive officer of the Wachovia Bank at the time, and she said, well, what did John Medlin say? John Medlin said, you're an idiot, you can't initiate a hostile takeover of a community bank. So Peggy and I got the legal pad out, and we put the positives on one side, the negatives on another. And I said, babe, I got to try it. I could never, ever not give it a shot. So I quit. We had a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. Rented a room on the top floor of a dilapidated building with one light coming down. This is way before cell phones. Got a Radio Shack answering machine and trudged through the town of 25,000 at Frankfort, Kentucky, saying, would you like to sell your stock for 3 times what it's trading for? You know how many shares I got? Not one. So I had to crawl on my belly, first back to Peg, and then to my boss to get my job back. And she looked at me and she said, you forgot, didn't you? I said, no, ma'am, I didn't forget. I know the 3. Wherever you hang your hat is home. How long do I have? If we've got to move, how long do I have? And you remember this, Chip, we can always live in a mobile home because the only thing that matters is our faith. So as I stand before you and I look at the list of folks that have come before me to receive this award, I know they feel the same way. I know Jimmy and Sis Blanchard. I know Tripp and Blair. Pete Kite's a good friend. Paul Garcia's a good friend. I don't know Pam Joseph, but I know Phil Tomlinson really well. I do not have the pleasure of knowing Brooks Smith, but Steve Johnson and I were in the web banking business when there were 2,300 websites in the United States of America. So Peggy, we're proud to accept this award today. Thank you very much.